Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. This is a video tutorial of how to color this image from Crafting Desert Divas. This little bear riding a broom is one of their fairly new releases. It is not a very large image, but it does offer a lot of opportunity for some good coloring using your Copic markers. Today I use Copic markers W1, W3, W4, W6, and W7. I also used Cool Gray C2, C3, and C6. Even though you're not going to really see them in the video progress, they were actually used kind of after the fact, if you will. For the yellows I used Y08 and Y18. For the browns, E00, E11, E15, E33, 34, and 35. I also used some E87 for the bow that you just saw me color a second ago. This video has been filmed in 2x fast forward mode so that you can watch the coloring but yet not get too bored. I did edit out some redundancies of this video just to make it a little bit easier to watch as well. As usual, should you have any questions, feel free to email me or send me a private message here on YouTube, and I will be glad to answer those. This video, along with step-by-step instructions, will be available on my website, which is lorettaroger.com. So you can check those out. Now, I did start from my lightest color to my darkest with the coloring of this image, and as I'm speaking, you should be watching the continued coloring of the hat. And as I layered that color down, I feathered the edges of it slightly inward, if you will, pretending that my light source was actually coming from the bottom right of this image up towards the top of his hat. So it just really came out well. Now also, before we get to that part of the video, you will need to go ahead and get yourself a sticky note, a post-it, whatever you have handy, because we are going to do some masking and some airbrushing towards this second half of the video. Just give this guy a little bit more interest. Anytime you're coloring with Copic markers, it's good to know that if you have a mistake, if it's fairly small, you can use your colorless blender, which is more of a color remover than anything, to push that color through the paper and into the cardstock or into scrap paper below it, whatever you have, and clean up any mistakes. Now, if you make a horrendous mistake, there are ways to try to correct it, but if they don't work, it's just paper, and at the end of the day, you can just destroy it and start over. It's not a big deal. Now when you're coloring the broom, this is a really small little area. I use my E18 marker as well as my E11 and 13 to color that broom. It didn't require a whole lot of shading, but I did actually start from darkest to lightest on this one just because of the size. Now as I start to color this bear, I wanted to lay down a fairly heavy yet even coat of my base color, which in this case was E00. By flooding the paper, so to speak, it's not really flooding it in this way, I've got a good base, like I said, for my other colors, and they will look kind of muddy and messy at first as I start with this image, but as I continue to blend from my lightest to my darkest and then back again, you'll see that I do in fact get a really great result from this this particular way of doing it. I do tend to take my marker and flick it towards the from the outside inward, just so that later on when I'm ready to blend those colors back together, they will blend a little bit more smoothly. And it also just kind of adds that natural variegation that in this case a bear would have naturally anyway. So we know he's pretend and he's really a fun little guy to color, so I do hope you'll check these images out from Crafting Desert Divas. We've got a great shop. So now that I'm going to continue coloring this guy, I do not have to worry too much about the inside of his ears. because they don't show too much, even though I did go back with an R21 marker to give him a little blush on his cheeks and a little bit of the pinkish color inside of his ears. I'm going to continue blending this until I have it exactly the way I like it, and I'm even going to go back to my darker color and get that exactly like I want it. When you're coloring this type of image, just be patient. Once again, I'd like to tell you that this was filmed in 2x fast forward mode, just so that it's a little bit easier to watch. Today I have my camera still set up right over the top of my head, but I have angled it slightly so that you can see the coloring a little bit better. One of the things that I like to do is to airbrush, which many of you already know that I like to do. And so I am going to grab a post-it note and stamp this image onto it, and then fussy cut it with my scissors so that I create a mask. Now, this part of the video can be a little tedious, so if you don't want to watch me cutting the mask, just fast forward through it. It's not that bad. But after I colored the star, I did notice a few little boo-boos there, and I cleaned those up with my colorless blender. You don't have to be real precise when you're cutting a mask. You do need to make sure that you've got part or all of as much of the image as you can on the sticky note there, so that you'll be able to adhere it over the main image for your airbrushing or whatever it is that you're needing the mask for. Now, once I've cut this mask, it will actually live in the sleeve that I store the stamp set in, and it will last a pretty good long time as long as you're careful with them. And you don't really even have to be too careful. It's just about masking off the main image while I airbrush over the top of it. There were a couple of colors that, as I go through the airbrushing process here in just a minute, you'll see that I end up not using them, or I tried to use them and they were actually dry. I wanted this to look very much like a sky that was entering into mid-evening to late evening, but that the moon behind this little witch riding guy, I should say broom riding guy, would still be bright and pronounced. I do want to tell you that when you're cutting out a mask or you're fussy cutting anything, I want you to note that I am not moving my scissors a whole lot. I'm using my left hand to guide my scissors around the image. I'm really moving the image, not the scissors. You do obviously move them enough to close the blades so that you can get this darn thing fussy cut out, but you do not want to move those scissors too much, or you will cause really sharp edges that are really not nice when it comes to the end product. So that's just a little note on doing mask. When I put this on, it wasn't sticky enough toward the bottom, so I just grabbed my tape gun there and I just restuck that down. And after it's all airbrushed, you'll see me actually go back and pick that up by just using a hard eraser. And so I'm going to quickly go over this image with the different Copic inks. I do have a airbrush that is the compressor instead of just the canned air, which I absolutely love. They can be expensive. I did get mine directly from international, the Copic International people. I will try to remember to leave that information in my blog post so that you will have it. But the more colors you use on something like this, actually the better it is. You don't want it to get muddy, so you do not want to use really too dark of colors, but you don't want to go too light either. It's about a balance, and sometimes this kind of thing really does just take practice. I've done it so many times through the years that honestly, there is no science to it, but I do really have it down to where I want it to be. As we move along, once I removed that mask off camera, I did cut the remaining layers for the card from my Sizzix Big Shot machine using dies that I purchased from Your Next Stamp, and they are purest rectangle dies. I also went back off film, which you're not going to see, and I redid some of the shadowing behind this image. But to give this image a little bit more interest, I used my colorless blender, and I used the bullet end of one of the original markers, and I randomly in the background pushed that colorless blender onto the paper, which lifted the color away, causing these little dots which look like small stars in the sky behind him. This was really a good choice. I really am glad that I did it. I also used that same colorless blender and went over the edges of the image to kind of blend those back out. There you saw me using the eraser, and now I'm going to clean up any little bits that I think that too much ink got taken off of by using the marker that I airbrushed it with. And in that case it was an E08. I even used a little E00 in there. I know that that part of the video moves kind of quickly, but anyway, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. Once again, if you have questions, email me or private message me here on YouTube. Thank you for joining me, everyone. A still picture will follow this video, as well as just some still footage of the finished card for your enjoyment. So stamp happy and be a blessing. Remember, always be kind to one another. Life's just too short not to be. I will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.